Hello, so my name is Russell Wright and I'm coming to you from SSWG, which stands for Southend on Sea Wargaming, and it's a club that's been long established in the Southend, South Essex area. We're well known amongst the wargaming community in the UK. I think we're well known for, in particular, our tables and the fact that we're very fortunate to have our very own location permanently in place. So that's what you're seeing here. This is an example of one of the tables we could put on, and we have around 24 tables in the club that we use to run events. So speaking of events, we've decided to come up with a new event called World Open War. And the idea of this was to give teams from across the world a chance to come and play bolt action to a pretty high standard and to compete to see which team is the strongest, potentially, in the world. So, how are we going to do that? Well, we are on the 21st and 22nd of October staging a 2-day event, and it will involve 16 teams coming from places as far away as South Africa, United States, Denmark, and plenty of the home nations there as well. And they will be competing over 6 games to see who can come away with a trophy for the first ever World Open War. Okay, so the tournament. Let's have some details on what we're doing with this bolt action tournament that we're going to be playing in the UK in 2023. Firstly, we will have 16 teams, as I say, from around the world attending. As I mentioned, we're going to have the USA, 2 teams from the US, South African team, Danish teams, Spanish teams, German teams, even a team from Switzerland, along with Scotland, Wales and England also being represented. We're very glad to invite Poland along as well, and we'll be looking to maybe add teams in the future. So there's 16 teams. How those teams are selected will be completely down to the teams to decide independently. So we have lots of people who have been running sub-tournaments to pick their team of 3 players. And the teams will consist of 3 players. So there'll be a captain and 2 supporting players for the tournament. So when they arrive, what can they expect? Well, they'll be playing 6 games and they will be split into group games. So on day 1, we will have 4 groups where each team plays against the other member of the group and they push on and they see where they finish in ranking. Day 2's matches will then depend on the rankings from day 1. And I'll explain that a little bit more later on. So we are hoping, with 48 players in total, that this will actually be the biggest event in the UK this year.
Okay, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask here, Russ. First of all, why 3 players per team?
Well, we had a lot of experience here of running 3-player events. We have a tournament called Three Good Men that we've been running for about 5 years now, and I believe it's the only team event regularly ran in the UK. And we've had a lot of success with 3 players. We find 4 players sometimes can be a bit of a stretch for a team to put together. 3 is a good number, and it also means quite often we have teams ask for a second team. It seems like 3 and 6 are magic numbers for wargamers for some reason. Maybe no surprise that 6 is a magic number for them.
Okay, and then same note, why 16 teams?
Well, we are limited by the amount of room we have here. Now, with an extension that we've built, the club now has room for 24 tables. So we can run 48 players, and it's not going to be the most luxurious of locations in terms of room. We might be a little bit snuggled in, but however, we are able to get 24 tables. If the number of players was to go up, the club next year would look at maybe moving to a local building, whether that be a school or a hotel. So, when it comes to list building and deciding what list to bring to the tournament, we acknowledge there are lots of different ways of doing that, and many tournaments use different approaches. For us, we've gone with the following. We'll be using 1,100 points per army list. We will be using single generic platoons only. So single generic platoons only. No feather lists, definitely no tank lists, and no double platoons. The teams, which are made up of 3 players, will only be allowed to pick a nation once. So for example, if you've picked Germany or the United Kingdom, as one of your armies, you can't pick them twice. So every team will have 3 different armies in their team. And then the other point we have on this is we have a list of which units are going to be available. Now, my friend Ryan Waggon's worked really hard on producing a list, which you have on Excel, which shows every single unit, to our knowledge at least, that's ever been listed in one of the bold action books. And I'm pretty happy to make that available to anyone who'd like to see it. So that's where we're coming from at the moment. Why are we doing that? It might be a fair question. Dean, do you have any questions on that?
Just a few. First of all, why 1,100 points per army?
Okay, good question. Well, the reason for that is we're well aware most tournaments will play either 1,000 points or 1,250 points. So we're going for slightly more. We think that gives players a few more options, given we've only got a single generic platoon. So there's a little bit more they can do with it. But equally, it means net listing, where a player could simply take a list they've used elsewhere, will not work. I think if you take a 1,000-point list and you just add 100 points to it, that is not necessarily going to be a strong list for this tournament. So players really need to think about what they want to do for this tournament in particular.
Okay, second question. Why single generic platoons?
Well, the reason for that is I love tournaments that have double or multiple platoons, but you do get a lot of spamming of units. So you may see players take 2 or 3 platoons and punching in 3 or 4 snipers or 3 mortar teams, depending on what options are allowed. And then with theatre lists again, the issue there is, if we go theatre, we're going to end up with 16 Soviet lists that are either CeeLo Lights or Stalingrad. As we know, those theatres are particularly strong. So we decided we don't really want the list build to decide the outcome of the game, although it's still important, of course. We want to see how skilled the players are and how they can perform with an army with some restrictions, particularly on our tables. And I'll talk about the tables later, because they're going to have a big influence on this tournament.
Okay, last question. Which of the nations do you think will be the most popular?
Oh, well, we do still expect to see a lot of Soviet lists. We know they're particularly strong because they have lots of options that are good and are at good value. United Kingdom lists have been very popular recently, so I imagine we're going to see some Gurkhas and we're going to see some Stuarts. And then really after those two, we could see a real mix. Potentially we could see Japanese close combat armies. We could see Finnish snipers maybe making a comeback. We could see Americans with the move and fire rules. So I do think hopefully we're still getting a good mix of units. And the captains really do need to think about making their teams all different. Every list needs to be a little bit different because they're going to be on different tables.
Excellent.
So why is Southend-on-Sea Wargaming a great location, in our opinion, to run a tournament? Well, first of all, the building itself. We are very fortunate in that we own a building permanently, so we have 24/7 access to it, which means critically we're able to store a lot of terrain. It also means the tables here have been designed specifically for gamers. So as an example of that, we have one room that has 8 tables that are 6 feet by 5 feet. So a 6x4 is normal, but that extra foot means there's room for players to set stuff up on their side of the table, whether that's dice or their units, and prepare properly. Also, we have a lot of stalls in the place to make sure people can sit comfortably if they need to, and we have side tables where armies on trays can be placed. And of course we have a lot of trays as well here. On top of that, the club has a centre play area which has a table which can be used to play a 54 square foot game, but we will be breaking that up and using it for 6 foot by 4 foot tables, again with room at the edge for players to set units up or to put dice and other gaming equipment. We also have a small kitchen, so we're able to provide drinks all during the event, hot and cold. We don't have a license though, so no alcohol unless people want to bring that for themselves. We have toilet facilities, and we have our own workshop where we can fix and repair models and where we do a lot of our terrain building. And we also have a new extension area for overflow, where we're going to be putting 6 tables, which means we got the capacity to 24. If we needed more space in the future, we would certainly look at other options of where we could move, but for the moment we feel like this is the ideal place to play a tournament in the United Kingdom. So where are we exactly? So Southend is on the south coast of Essex. We are around 40 miles away from London, and we have 2 train networks that feed into us, as well as airlines and airports in the area. I can get into that later maybe. What are we actually going to do on the day for players? Well, when players arrive on Saturday morning to start the game, hopefully they've had a chance to come here already, because we're going to open the club on Friday night. All the tables will be set up, and we're doing a pre-test on the tables very soon to make sure, although we're confident of this, to make sure we have all the terrain and dressing we need. I think we will. But they can come on the Friday, they can see the table layouts. All 24 tables will be different, and they can get some practice in and maybe have a bit of a socialising evening, have a drink and catch up with people from all over the world who play bolt action. The next morning we'll be starting our first game from around 9:15, and every game will be 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now that's a little bit longer than most tournaments allow, and that's basically to help and to recognise with the fact that we will have many players coming from different metas who will play the game differently depending on where they're from. That gives us time to try and make sure there are no ruling issues, and to help that as well, we will have at least 3 referees at the event to help players if there are any misunderstandings or different conclusions reached in terms of what the rules specifically say. So Saturday we play our 3 games, and then in the evening, for anyone who wants to, we've hired a restaurant where we're going to have a buffet, and hopefully lots of players will be able to attend that and enjoy it. And then we go on to Sunday. So on Sunday we'll start about 9:15 again. The reason for that, and not starting a little later, is because we have a lot of international players and we want to make sure they have time to catch flights back where needed to get home. We'll play our 3 games on Sunday, and then we will have a trophy presentation. With regards to things like lunch, we will provide lunch where we will ask people to place an order with us, and we will have a local restaurant supply for us. In the morning we will provide bacon rolls and sausages and other breakfast items, something that the club's always done, and we've done at every tournament we've run, and we're quite proud of that. Do we think it will go well? Well, we've got a lot of experience now. We have been running tournaments here for a few years, and I'm delighted to say we've had overseas visitors come here on more than one occasion, whether that would be from Germany or Spain or maybe the home nations as well, Scotland and Wales, and I think the feedback we've gotten has always been really good. So as a location, I do hope that we will hopefully really please everyone who attends and put on a good show for them. This really is a club that is for the gamers. The area itself as well, Southend, it's got plenty of hotels here. They're not expensive, so there's a big benefit over London. Trying to find a location this big in London would be extremely expensive, and then hotels would be extremely expensive. However, we still are within commutable distance from London and from the London airports. So hopefully players will be able to find what they need in terms of accommodation, and of course we've been advising where that's been of help. Thankfully, for that reason, for the fact that we're running it at our own location and we're not trying to book hotels for anyone, we're leaving that to the players, the event itself for 2 days is only costing £30 per player, which I think is amazing value, £15 a day to play at this club. Good.
Okay, you seem to have covered everything there, Russ. Still, I suppose there is one question. You mentioned Southend-on-Sea, where we're located. If you're not staying in the local area, is it an easy place to get to?
It's actually easier than it looks on the map. So if you see the UK on a map and you look at England, you can see Essex tucked away on the eastern counties on the River Thames, and it doesn't necessarily look that accessible. But fortunately, we have, as I say, 2 train lines running from London. So we are about an hour 10, I would say, from central London by train. And we have a local airport in the area, which is literally, I'd say it's less than 10 minutes drive away, and is now increasing the number of destinations connecting to it. That's London Southend Airport. And then we're also reasonably close to London Stansted Airport and to London Gatwick Airport. And then of course there is also London City Airport in the East End of London. So we have within maybe 80-minute journey time 4 airports. So for international travellers, given London's a hub, this is not a bad location at all to get to. So starting on Saturday, how are we actually going to match up the teams and the players? Well, I'll explain the group system in a moment, but what I'll do first is I'll explain how the teams, when they are allocated against each other, will pick their players. So we're going to have 3 players per team. That includes a captain. Now both captains will roll off, and the captain who wins will then get to pick which player he wants to put onto 3 tables that we will allocate per round. So of the 24 tables we have, if Team A is playing Team B, they will be allocated 3 tables. These 3 tables will be very different in character. So the captain, who rolls off and wins, has an important decision to make. Which table suits which army best, which one might be a problem, which one is ambivalent to the table it gets. So the captain who wins picks the table, puts his army on it, and then the opponent captain will decide which one of his armies he wants to put against that army on that table. Once that's done, we reverse, and the captain who lost the roll-off will pick the second table and will decide which army goes on it, and the first captain will then pick which army will compete against them, and that will leave us with 2 armies and 1 table. So the captains must not focus only on the first table that they pick or the second table that they pick. They have to think about the combination for the entire team, making sure their armies of selection do not end up on a table that strongly unfavours them. In terms of the match-up with your opponent army, it is possible the table could be more important. Our tables will be dressed, although dressing will not cover, will not count as cover rather, and we'll explain that maybe on the day. The tables will also typically be 3D to at least some extent. We don't want flat bowling ball tables. We want tables that more realistically model terrain. And you can see that really well here in the example in front of me, where you actually have this ledge, which will give you fantastic firing positions to work from, although maybe you're not in cover. So that is how we're going to lock up and decide on matchups. So picking the table, unlike most tournaments, will be critical.
There is one question here then. What scoring system are we using?
For scoring, we're going to be using 3 points per win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a loss. So that means in theory, when Team A plays Team B, you could get 9 points to 0 as a result. However, to make the matchups meaningful, to actually be important as well, there will be a bonus point if you outscore your opponent on points in your matchup. So if Team A had a win and 2 draws, that would give them 5 points. Team B would have 2 draws and a loss. They would get 2 points, but we would give a bonus point to Team A. So it means there's a potential 10 points every round, and there's a maximum score for your group after 3 rounds of 30 points. In terms of breaking ties, if 2 teams were tied on points, to allocate them a tier, we will look at secondaries. Every table will have 1 secondary on it. We are recording how many secondaries each team collects, and that will decide a tie. So secondaries are going to be important in this tournament. If even after secondaries the 2 teams are tied, at that point we will look at dice killed, the number of dice you have killed. So we're looking for aggressive play. We want to reward players for destroying units, and therefore we are not going to use a dice killed versus dice lost technique or mechanic. Instead, we will just look at how many dice did you destroy. That may also affect the way teams decide to build their lists. So I've mentioned the group system that we're going to be using. I want to explain that because it is a really key mechanism to the tournament and how the tournament will work. Now, on Saturday, we're going to have 4 groups of 4 teams. So very similar to, say, the World Cup draw for football or European Cup. Now, every team will play every other team in the group. So that means there'll be 3 rounds. So you have teams A, B, C and D. They will all play each other once. Now, after completing all the games in the group, we will have a table and we will have all 4 teams ranked 1, 2, 3 or 4. Now, we are going to use those rankings to then on day 2 create new groups. There will be a finalist group that will consist of the 4 teams that won their groups. There will be a second level group that is for the second teams, and so on for the third and the fourth teams. Now, this means that every game really matters. So from day 1, you have to start winning. Dropping a round could be critical because it could mean you drop off from a higher tier. In terms of actually grouping the teams as well, we are going to seed some of the teams to ensure there are no groups that are much stronger than other groups. That's to try and ensure a level playing field. The other thing we will do with the groups, absolutely no teams that have come from the same nation will play each other in the first group. So for example, the USA, we're very fortunate to have them bringing 2 teams from different parts of the country. They will not be playing each other on day 1. Secondly, we're going to keep the home nations separate from each other as well, because we want to make sure people who get an opportunity to play rarely have an opportunity to play each other here. So that's the logic behind that. It also guarantees that on day 2 there are no rematches. So you will come here and you will play 6 different opponents. That is a guarantee. And we will then look at day 2, awarding a trophy to every group winner on day 2. So everyone will get a trophy who wins a group. Do you have any questions, Dean?
Yeah, so doesn't this mean that if you don't win your group, you're knocked out?
Well, in a way, I guess it does. If you don't win your group, you can't win the overall tournament. That is certainly true. So it does mean every game is really important. However, unlike other tournaments, if you have a really bad day 1, and say you went with, let's say you lost all 3 rounds, and you finished 4th. At that point in another tournament, your day 2 is a dead rubber. You're playing for really no outcome other than for fun. However, with our method, you're going to a new group, which will be against the other 3 teams that came 4th, and you will be playing still for a trophy. We will be awarding trophies for every group winner. So that means maybe you can't win the overall tournament, but your games will still really matter because you'll be playing for something.
So on day 2, could teams from the same nation play each other?
Now in theory they could. This is something that in terms of game balance, we have to decide between game balance and we have to decide against wanting to keep teams separately. So, for example, let's take our friends from the USA. If they were to win both of their groups, they would play each other in the final group, which is unfortunate, although I'm pretty certain they wouldn't be too upset by that should it happen. However, for groups 2, 3 and 4, if for any reason, let's take the Americans again as an example, if the American teams both finish second, they would both go into group 2, but we will give teams the opportunity to switch out should they want to with another team, and so one of the US teams could concede its second place ranking and we will promote the highest ranked third team into that group to ensure we keep teams separately. So we've got a balance. We're going to have the 4 best teams, and then really it's up to team captains and whether they would like to avoid playing their own nations. Finally, in summary, we're really looking forward to running this event as a club. We've had a lot of buy-in, and I want to thank everyone who's a member who's helped, and we have many people who are contributing behind the curtain, as it were. On the day, we're going to have club members here to support players, whether that's doing admin stuff, collecting scores, helping with decisions, or even providing drinks at table whilst people are playing. So I want to thank everyone at the club who's been involved in that. I also want to thank the club for keeping the price as low as possible for players who are attending. We really are running this for the players and not as a profit-making event. The other thing I'd just like to mention in brief is we are really optimistic in terms of our turnout. So, as we all know, running tournaments can be really tough in terms of people dropping out at the last minute because life happens. As a result, we already have 2 reserve teams in place. I'm speaking to another team to cover in case there is another issue, but I'd like to reach out to anyone there who'd be interested in playing in the tournament, either by bringing a team or by being a reserve player. Please do contact me and I'll make sure my details are included on the subfolder for this video. Also, if anyone does put forward a team as a reserve team, I promise we will give you preference next year when allocating spots for teams. So we have 16 slots this year for teams. We had interest from around 23 teams and we had to keep it to 16. But please do contact me if you're interested in being a reserve team for this year or playing next year. And who knows, if things go really well and we run this event next year, maybe it'll even be a bigger event. Maybe instead of 16 teams, we could be looking at 20 or 24, or let's just see what happens. So, I promise we'll do more videos in future. We'll explain a little bit more about the teams that are coming, how the tables and the game mechanics will merge with each other to produce really interesting games, and talk a little bit about maybe the trophies and the sponsorship that we'll be receiving as well. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please do send any questions you have. You can contact us either on the subfolder here, where we'll leave details, or on my club's website, which is sswg.co.uk. I really look forward to talking to anyone who'd like to know more. Thank you very much.